It is time. What's going on, everybody? It is time for your weekly infusion of poker strategy into the lunch hour. My name's Rob Gardner. I am here with this week's pizza of choice. It is a Domino's pizza. And if you can guess which two toppings are on this pizza in the next 5 minutes. Sorry, I'm hearing myself in the air. There we go. If you can guess which two pieces of stop talking to me. Hang on. Holy crap. I was hearing myself 3 times in my ears there. Anyways, if you guys can guess which two toppings are on my pizza, we'll get you a free month of Rec Poker Premium over at joinrec.poker. You'll want to check that out. Awesome community. They do a lot of teaching and study sessions. They have a whole bunch of home games going on throughout the week that you can compete in, win prizes. It's a really, really cool community. So definitely go check that out. No, not pineapples and anchovies. It is not pepperoni and black olives. Apologies for the technical difficulties there early on. We're going to have a good hour here. I've got a couple different hands that have been submitted. We've got some tournament hands. We've got some cash game hands. And there's a hand that was posted by poker.org on social media that I want to talk about. Really crazy spot, three-handed for a ring. So we're going to get into it here in just a second. Nope, not cheese and pepperoni. Not there yet. All right, let me grab this first hand here. Big day today. We've got this going on for the next hour tonight at 7:30 Eastern over at watchchasethedream.com. We've got episode 2 of the Chase the Dream podcast. That is our live weekly podcast where we talk with 6 other everyday poker players who are chasing their poker dreams. So definitely check that out and be a part of that. Would be great. It's not sausage and pepperoni. You guys are close-ish, though. You're close-ish. This is actually one of my favorite combos on pizza that not many people, I don't know if anybody, I would be shocked if anybody in this chat has ever had this type of pizza before. I'd be super surprised. We'll give you guys a couple more minutes. Hope everybody's doing well. It is blisteringly cold here. I think the wind chill was like 10 below this morning. Hopefully it's supposed to warm up next week. Really hope it does because I'm heading up to Minneapolis and running aces next week after Wednesday, after the stream. I'm going to head up there for the weekend. I'm going to be playing in some tournaments. It's the Rec Poker meetup up there. They've got 4 tournaments over the weekend, I think. And some meetup cash games. They're playing spread limit, so that'll be interesting. Max $100 per street definitely kind of changes the dynamics on the cash game front a little bit. It kind of makes for a weird spots on turns and rivers when the pot starts to get big, and you can't really bet a sizing that that can apply a lot of pressure. So should be a good time though, and it looks like the weather is going to be decent. Anybody here in the South? I saw that New Orleans got over a foot of snow yesterday. Absolutely insane. We're avoiding all of that, thankfully. Nope, not pepperoni and bacon. I'll give you guys one more minute. And then I will unveil. Much better than last week. That Pizza Hut pizza was awful. We got 2 more of the cheapies to go through. We're going to do Little Caesars and Papa John's the next 2 weeks. And then we're going to go exploring because there's lots of pizza in this town that I've never had. What's going on, Tones? Good to see you. All right. Nobody got it. The answer is pepperoni and jalapenos. Much, much better. You get some cheese, some meat, a little bit of spice and kick. And Domino's does a good job. They use the pickled jalapenos, so there's a little bit of flavor to them. Highly underrated. Highly, highly underrated. Okay. We're going to get this down, and we're going to talk some poker strat here. Tone says, I just got back from a cruise where I won a $2,500 package to their main event in November. Oh, hell yeah, Tones. Congratulations. Oh, there's cheese on it, but that's not a... Cheese is on every pizza. It's not a topping. Pepperoni is probably my favorite topping. So, Tones, is that another cruise? Do you go back for a cruise to play the main event? Or is that in a land-based casino? Yeah, last week's pizza got trashed. I'm not like a pizza snob, but like there's a difference between greasy pizza with flavor and greasy pizza with no flavor. And that was like greasy pizza with no flavor. Oh, that is amazing. So you get to play a tournament and go on another cruise. That's the nuts right there. Don't get all technical with me here. All right. Let's talk some poker strategy. So we have this hand here. This was who submitted? I think this was a Dan hand too. I stole this hand from the tournaments hand history channel on Rec Poker. They've got a pretty cool forum-based channel over there where you can post hands and talk with the community about it. And this was a spot that took place. Let's see. He said 40 from the money with a little under 400 players. So kind of on the money bubble, kind of not. Basically, pretty much about 22 big blinds effective with everybody at the table. We've got a very, very, very easy open here from basically under the gun, the hijack flats, and it folds around to the big blind. And we flop top pair with a decent kicker. Now, for me, when I'm in this spot, the first thing I want to think about is what does hijack's flatting range look like? And obviously, if you have a HUD, you have stats, if you're in a live tournament and you have the ability to, really pay attention to showdowns, you're probably going to have a better idea of what this range looks like. Obviously, we don't have any of that info. Dan says this was the big buy in the $99 monster stack on Global. Okay. So this is basically their monster global stack series that was going on. $99 is the high end buy-in. They do like a low, a medium, and a high. And those series events bring in a wide range of players. You can have some really good players in those events, and there's still plenty of recreational players and fish that come in and put the pony up the extra bucks to be in this tournament. Now, what's interesting to me in this spot is because they're only 20 big blinds deep, I would expect this flatting range to be pretty damn strong. I would expect some good players to mix in some traps here and also just take some of their stronger hands and put it in their calling range because of some of the ICM implications. I would expect some weaker players here to play a little bit more scared and maybe flat with some hands that they should be 3-betting, shoving here very comfortably. What's interesting is I didn't look this one up, but I wouldn't be surprised to find that there are absolutely no flats here. Wouldn't surprise me in the least. Because generally when you have early position opens versus early position opens, it really doesn't want us doing any flatting. Versus single action, 20 big blinds. Oh, it does have some calls. Okay. But you can see, well, you can kind of see. You can see how tight this range is. This is a really, really, really tight range. And a fair amount of the calls are actually some of these traps. So, line this back up here. So, I think we need to proceed with caution in a spot like this for sure. Now, on the flip side of this is a really good board, right? Like, we have an ace in our hand. They're probably gonna shove queens here. I wouldn't expect a whole lot of trapping here with queens. I think the trapping would be more like aces and kings and maybe some like ace king. Definitely could see ace queen calling here. Ace 3 suited feels a little bit loose, but I guess it's possible. One thing we don't know too is just like how aggressive the rest of these players have been playing. So like if these players here have all been really passive, then, you know, this player could be like, all right, I'm never getting squeezed by anybody here, so I can make a looser call. But I suspect that this is a pretty tight range. So what are you guys doing here? Who wants to check and who wants to bet? Our hero did elect to check. S9 Bovine says he's a bet. I think you can go both ways here. I think that the advantage to betting is we can start building a pot and maybe potentially if we need to jam turns or over jam turns if like another club comes out or, you know, maybe a card like a 10 that starts to coordinate the board a little bit more. The upside to checking is we do get to pot control, get some information from our opponent, and maybe keep the pot smaller so that if there are some bad runouts here, we leave ourselves room to kind of play some defense and call some rivers without necessarily having to be all in. So I think there's merit for both. I would probably slightly lean towards checking. And the only reason I would lean towards checking is I really want to see if my opponent bets what size they use. Because I feel like even in these 99s, you're going to get a decent amount of information here by how big they go. So to me, the information is a little bit more valuable. Dan says, I don't think this is a 3 streets of value pot, and I felt more comfortable pot controlling. Yep, I think that's a reasonable take. Yeah, if we're going to go, I'd go smallish too. So Dan does elect to check, and our opponent checks back. Now, this is interesting to me because what types of hands... We obviously, if they don't have anything, it's not hard to figure out what types of hands they check back, all the crap that they don't have. What types of traps would they feel comfortable checking back with here? In my mind, the hands that they would comfortably check back with here would be ace queen, pocket queens, and I don't know if they're checking back ace 3. Maybe they are. But I feel like ace 3 probably bets here a decent percentage of the time. I also think like while they can check and trap here, I think hands like sets of queens and sets of 3s that are unblocking the ace definitely want to try to get a street of value here. And see if they can get us to call, because we're going to have a lot of aces in our range. And if we have a hand like pocket kings or pocket jacks, there really isn't a lot of value to letting an extra card come off, because what's going to come off that's going to allow us to call a bet on turn that didn't allow us to call a bet on flop? Like a gut shot straight draw, like it's just too thin. So like trapping here with hands like to try and get like kings or jacks or 10s to sucker them in, I don't think it really makes a lot of sense. So I think a fair amount of their traps here would have to be like hands that block the ace, like the ace queen, maybe like ace 3 suited. Now, again, these are all baselines, right? Like there's no perfect way to slice and dice this, and we're not always going to be able to know. You kind of have to go with your best logical judgment. But this isn't a situation where we have a lot of like suited connectors that are like really wide and we're just hoping to like turn a club and then like go nuts. We're pretty shallow. We're really focusing on pairs and realized equity over unrealized equity. So I don't know that he's got a lot of traps here. And I think the ones that would be here would include some sort of ace. So the turn's a 5 of hearts. And at this point, our hero bets, and I think this is the right play. I think now there are flush draws out there. Not too worried about any of the like wheel draws, but we definitely still want to try and start getting value from a queen. Maybe our opponent has a hand like kings or jacks and they might call one straight. If they do have any type of flush draw here, which is going to be really unlikely with us having the jack of hearts in our hand, we still want to try and start getting value and equity deny those hands. Maybe 3.5 if they have sets or any two pair, they'll raise. Yeah, you could make an argument for going a little bit bigger here to kind of split our opponent's range with basically with the intention of folding to raises. I think there's some merit to that. Kind of finding that sizing that forces them to fold worse and raise better. Our opponent clicks it back. And this sucks on a lot of reasons. Now, again, this could be a lot of things, and without more context about our opponent, the best thing we can do is just kind of look at the situation and see what makes the most sense and go with our best like assessment of what's going on, right? So when I look at this, I'm asking myself, like, what are his value hands and what are his bluffs? And we'll start with the value hands, okay? What value hands want to raise this small on a board that has a flush draw on it? Now, there are some sickos out there that can take a set and two pair, and they're like, you know what? I don't care about the flush draw. I'm going to like really play this trappy and maybe see if I can get my opponent to overcommit with a flush draw and come over the top, or make a loose call and, you know, maybe they have reverse implied odds because they hit their flush, but I hit my flush. There's some crazy sickos. That's like a really tiny percentage of the player pool. So when I see this raise, to me, this makes me feel like it's a little bit weaker than stronger. Because if I have a set here, if I have two pair here, I do not want to give a flush draw this good of a price. I don't want to keep those hands in. Especially if I think that there's a chance that they're not going to fold, right? I mean, because some of the flush draws are going to be combo draws like king, queen of hearts, queen, jack of hearts. And we want to extract value. So to me, this feels very semi-bluffy or, again, very, very weak. I also have to kind of question here too, like, let's say our opponent had a flush draw. They can just happily call here and see the river in position. They've got a positional advantage, right? See the river, evaluate. If the flush comes in, they can bet a multitude of different sizes. They have to see what we do first. So if they were to have a flush draw here and click it back, it would really, really suck to click this back and then get shoved on and now really not have proper odds to call when they could have just flatted. So this is kind of weird, right? Like, honestly, my gut reaction here, and it's very easy to say because I didn't flick the $99 in and I'm not in the moment. I think I shove here. Because I don't see this being a flush draw. This just feels like some kind of weird, like, I'm going to test you and see where you're at bluff. Maybe even turning some garbage hand into a bluff here. Because it doesn't make a lot of sense for him to do this with value. It doesn't make a lot of sense for him to do this with a flush draw. And if we call here, we're going to have no visibility on the river. We barely have any visibility now, right? Like, he's taking a really unorthodox line that doesn't make a lot of sense. And we're kind of forced to look at this and go, what the hell is this? But I feel like more often than not, this is not going to be nutted unless this is a very elite player. Now, I will say, like, if I scoped this player and they had like a $250 ABI, then I would lean away from shoving and maybe just call and be prepared to call most rivers and kind of see this as some kind of weird bluff. I will say the one other aspect about this that is really interesting is this exact sizing here sets up for almost a river jam. So there is kind of a weird thing here where like an opponent could like use this as kind of a bluff here, but also to set up that pot size shove on the river as a follow through bluff if they were going to commit to going 2 streets. So yeah, it's kind of interesting here that this is what they chose, but I think versus weaker players, I would jam. And I think versus stronger players, maybe like really, really strong players, I would flat. Dan says, I thought this was king queen and he didn't know what to do and didn't want to face a big bet on the river. Yeah. Yeah. And that's an interesting thing too, right? Like, so if that's your read, then you're ahead here and that does give you options. The only problem is if he has king queen here and he doesn't want to face a big bet on the river, I don't think he's ever shoving the river, right? So we're really not going to get any more value out of him. Excuse me, my nose is running all this jalapenos. We're not going to get any more value out of him. So if we have a very, like, if we're really confident that he's weak and we're beating him, denying him equity now and just ending the hand is going to be the best option. Now, again, if you think he's bluffing here a high percentage of the time and he's going to have high follow through, that's where we can start going, all right, we don't want to push his bluffs out. We actually have an amazing bluff catcher here because if you think about the hands he can flat that have a flush draw, if he has an appropriate range at all here, they're going to be very Broadway heavy, which means having the Jack of Hearts is an amazing card because it blocks a ton of the flush draws that he can actually have. And it's really hard for him to have a flush draw that's not a combo draw, right? Like, how many hands does he have that has a flush draw that doesn't have a Jack of Hearts or a Queen of Hearts? That's incredibly difficult to have. Or a hand like King 10 of Hearts, which has a straight draw, which is also a combo draw. So this is a really, really good bluff catcher. I wouldn't expect to see this kind of bluff followed through on a lot unless it was like a really, really elite player. Hey, Joey, good to see you, buddy. So yeah, the weaker the player, I think the more I would just jam here because I don't think we're getting any more value and I just don't want to give that player a chance to free roll here on the river. I want to deny equity. The better they are, the more I would call here and set a trap. The river is the Queen of Hearts, which is a throw up card. Especially if our read was that this opponent had king queen. The flush gets there. Now, one thing we do have to note here, like blockers and unblockers don't just come in the form of what's in our hand. The Queen of Hearts is a blocker to the flush, if you really think about it, right? Because again, we're working with this early, well, middle position flat off of 20 big blinds, 40 from the money. Very, very tight. So before this river card, we're thinking flush draws like King Queen of Hearts, Queen 10 of Hearts, Queen 9 of Hearts, King 9 of Hearts, like probably getting down to maybe like King 8 of Hearts, Queen 9 of Hearts, maybe Jack 9 of Hearts. But we're not expecting to see 5, 6 of Hearts here, 7, 8 of Hearts here, 6, 7 of Hearts. So us having the Jack is big. When the Queen comes out, as opposed to maybe like the 2 of Hearts, that's even bigger. Because now we're really getting thin on the flush draws. King 10, Jack 10, Jack 9, King 9. Maybe that's it. Maybe King 8. That is not a lot of combos of flush draws. So while the heart is kind of annoying, it's really not that scary of a card. The Queen part of it is what's much more scary, right? Because we did get this kind of feeler bet type play here, and we just don't have a good feeling for, you know, whether they would play a queen that way or not. We also have to remember how we look, right? We checked back the flop and bet small on the turn. Now, theoretically, can we have some strong hands going check bet? Absolutely. We can absolutely take some hands and trap trying to go for a check raise or just a check call. And then when he checks behind, we start betting 100%. This isn't the worst card in the deck. I would say the I would say, like, what would the worst card in the deck be? I would much rather have a Queen of Hearts than like a 2 of Hearts, 3 of Hearts, 4 of Hearts, 6 of Hearts, 7 of Hearts. Any of the low hearts. It does suck that it's a queen. But the flip side is, if our opponent does have a bluffing range here, this is a card they're absolutely going to bluff, right? So I guess it kind of depends on your read on your opponent. I think if your opponent is a high-level player that's capable of bluffing here, this is actually a really, really good card for us. If your opponent is a casual recreational player, then this is probably one of the worst cards. 10 or King of Hearts. Yeah, a King of Hearts would be... I mean, you're still going to have the fact that it blocks a lot of flush draws, which is nice. That's the hard part. The high cards all block the flush draws, which is really good for us. But the downside is they bring like 2 pairs in. So it's kind of like a little bit of a wash. At any rate, we're obviously checking here. And our opponent does shove all in. And this just, again, goes back to what we talked about on the turn. Like, I think the better the player this is, the more of a fist pump call it is. I think the worse... Yeah, the worse this player is, the more likely I'm going to be to very comfortably and very quickly fold. We beat chops. We do beat some chops. Yep. And Dan did fold, so we didn't actually get to see what happened there. So yeah, interesting spot. I think the biggest takeaway is going back to the turn. And I think anytime we face a weird raise like this that kind of really divides our paths, we have to kind of anticipate potentially that we're going to get the follow through on turn. And really, like, we should be making our decision about whether we're going to call river or not in this spot. Like, this is the spot we decide, yes, I'm calling the turn, or no, I'm not calling the turn. Or sorry, the river. We're deciding to call the river or not call the river right here on the turn. And honestly, like, you really should be thinking about not just, am I going to call river, but what rivers am I going to call? What rivers am I going to fold? Because a lot of times what people do, it's just inherent. They're like, well, I'm not folding for the min click. I got to call. And then the call, and then some weird card comes off and they face a shove and they're like, oh God, now what do I do? Or like, it's a card they weren't expecting, right? And like, now they're kind of confused. So I think going through that part of the thought process on the turn definitely helps. If it was a non-queen knob Broadway, I'm Carly calling. That makes sense. Yeah, and unfortunately, we don't get to know what happened there. All right. We have a cash game hand for all you cash game players. Let's get into the cash game mindset here. This is a 1-2 online cash game. We don't know what site, so assume your favorite cash game site of choice here. But it's 1-2, so we got some juicy stakes. We're 100 big blinds effective, $200 deep with everybody. Folds to the cutoff, and our hero raises to 5 big blinds. And the big blind defense. And the flop comes 6-6 jack with 2 clubs. Bluff on like cash. Dan, we're going to hit your other hand here in a little bit too. I saw it right before we went live, so I don't have it in the hand replayer, but I think I can pull the global one up and we can just play the global one live. So what's everybody want to do here? Yeah, that was 2.5 bigs. $5. Sorry. Can you tell I play tournaments more than cash? So I definitely like going pretty big here. I want to charge my flush draws. I want to charge my Jack X. I don't think all players assume that we have 6s in our range, or at least a lot of 6s in our range. So I think top pairs definitely going to call a juicy bet here. And our hero bets $7 or 3.5 bigs into a 6 big blind pot, which is like 60% pot, which is fine. I might go a little bit bigger, but I'm a greedy little, you know what? So, and our opponent check raises to $20. Now, this is wild. I think that the big blind definitely can have, from a theory perspective, I hate going that too far down that realm, but there are a lot of proper check raises here. Flush draws, the benefit of flush draws check raising here is flush draws don't have a lot of good visibility, right? Like if the flush draw hits, they have no way of knowing whether they're running into full houses or not. They don't know which outs are clean or which are dirty. So if you can clean up some equity and just take it down right here, that can be advantageous. A lot of small pocket pairs here, especially if they like have a club in their hand, would definitely do some check raising. Hands like 5s, 4s, 3s make for kind of good check raises. They unblock all of our opponents' fold range, you know, all the random ace X that would see bet at this and fold. I don't know beyond that. Like I wouldn't expect any like ace jack like, to check raise for value. And I don't know how much 6x would check raise here. It's interesting. I'm trying to think of what I would do in a cash game in this spot if I had a 6. I don't think I would be check raising here. At least not, I don't know. Maybe we split. Maybe it depends on whether we have a club in our hand or not. Like I could see maybe we call with our 6x that has a club and we check raise our 6x that doesn't. But this is obviously kind of an interesting spot. Yeah, in a vacuum, I think my baseline, I would lean towards this being bluffy and not super balanced. Our hero makes the call and the turn brings the flush in. Yeah, we RFI'd here. Yep. Yeah, I think we're kind of all on the same page here, right? Like, I think most of us would just call with our 6s. So this check raise feels very weak. I don't think this is a spot we would see a lot of like check raising a 6 for value. So we do make the call, and I think that's the right play. I don't think we want to shove. I don't think we want to fold. So now the ace of clubs comes in. And right? Like this card isn't really much of a blocker the way that the Queen of Hearts was in the last hand, because a decent amount of their ace high flush draws would 3-bet. You know, ace king suited should 3-bet, ace queen suited should 3-bet, ace 10 suited should 3-bet a percentage of the time, maybe not full frequency. And even some hands like ace 5, ace 4 suited can elect a 3-bet. So this card doesn't really block that many of his flush draws. At least not compared to like if a 9 of clubs rolled off or a 10 of clubs. That would be a little bit better. And our opponent checks. Now, I don't think, personally, my baseline here, I'm curious, some of you that play a little bit more cash than I do, I'm taking all of his flush draws or out of his range. Like, I don't think he has any flushes at this point. And the reason I'm taking flushes out of his range is because the only way he's getting our stack now, right, is to go big and then shove river. Like, I guess you could argue maybe he tries to go for the check raise, but people really hate getting check raised twice. So I think it's really ambitious to hit your flush and go, I'm going to check, hope to get bet a second time, check raise a second time, get called, and then try to get more value on the river. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. On top of the fact that, you know, let's say you have a hand here like 7-8 of clubs, you got to worry about getting counterfeit on the river, right? A jack or an ace puts a full house out there. Any club would just make a single club flush hand, you know, stronger than your 8 high flush. So to me, this is like either bluff that's just complete garbage now, or maybe has a hand like a6 and just literally hit the full house. But a lot more of the garbage than a6. So I'm not super worried about the a6. It doesn't take a lot. I haven't played cash since the summer. Yeah, I haven't played cash in like probably 6 months. Big blind definitely could have a lot of Jack X here. Scott says he likes overbetting the pot, to be honest. So I think we have to think about, we really have to think about our targets, right? Anytime we're bluffing, anytime we're betting for value, we have to think about targets. What are we trying to target? Not just the value of our hand, right? So if we kind of work back through it, right? We felt like the check raise on the flop was pretty weak, very bluff heavy, not super value heavy. And now one of the semi-bluff parts of their range comes through the ace of clubs and they check. So now we're pretty confident that that part of their range is gone. So now we're looking at what part of their range is left. And the part of their range that's left is like Jack X, like Joey talked about. Some weak pocket pairs that might turn hands into bluffs. Again, like 5s, 4s, 3s. And then maybe just some random bluffs that are just like, I don't believe you. I'm going to raise with king, queen offsuit, right? Could they have some weird raises here with an ace? Like, could they take some weird like ace 4 offsuit and just decide to bluff because it's a paired board and then turn an ace? Maybe it's a possibility. But if I look at that whole range, I don't feel like I have really wide value targets. So one of the things that I talk about when it comes to overbetting on rivers, but especially on turns, is if you're going to overbet, you want to do it versus the opponent who is cocky, doesn't like being bullied, and always wants to prove a point. Because those are the players that when you overbet, it's like you talked about their mama. And they're like, hell no, you're not pushing me around. Like that type of opponent specifically, that is the kind of like, let's go for it. Let's really try and put pressure on them. But if I don't have that type of specific read, I just want to get value from whatever I realistically can get value from. And to me, the most likely hand to get value from is a jack. So I would probably go here like half to 2/3. I do still want to equity deny single club hands, so I don't want to go really, really small and let, you know, king of clubs random card get there for cheap. But I think it's optimistic to get called here for more than 2/3 unless you think that they've got a lot of ace X in their range. Or like I said, they're the stubborn, don't push me around type kind of asshole vibe. Yeah, I feel like the stuff like ace 10 with the 10 of clubs, like I know some elite players will do like backdoor flush draw floats. I don't expect to see a lot of that. Now, this is a 1-2 online cash game. So you can make the argument, depending on what side it was on, especially that like the 1-2 players online, I mean, 1-2 online cash plays like 5-10 live. So it is a meatier, chunkier, theory-based cash game. But I mean, still, like, in those situations, like I think it's thin. 3-5 is what I'm thinking. 3-5 off. So let's see what our hero does here. Our hero decides to check back. I don't really like this. Well, okay. So the one advantage of checking back here, this is where I would say if you're checking back here, the reason you're checking back here is to never fold river. Right? You're checking back here because there's 26 big blinds in the pot, $52. At most, our opponent's probably going to bet pot, and I'm just fully committed to calling, probably even if a club spikes the river, right? I think they're capable. I think they have bluffs. I want to be able to make a very easy decision on the river. It is a little bit of a scary board because of the 4th club coming on the river, so I'm going to check back and just commit to calling. That would be the one advantage of checking. The weaker your player pool is, the more you're down in stakes, the softer fields. Betting here is going to be better because our opponents are always going to call and then check the river. And we don't have to worry about facing any like weird leads on the river. As we get into spots where players are tougher, they're better at check raising on turns and river. They're better at having some check raise bluffs. There's some merit to pot controlling here. And absolutely, yeah, if you check this turn and the river is the deuce of hearts, like you beat them in the pot. Like you literally you flick the chip in as they're sliding their chips in the middle. You have to. Otherwise, there's no incentive to the check. So the river is the 3 of hearts, and our opponent checks again. Now, go back through the whole hand here, right? Our opponent check raised pre-flop, checked flop, and then when it checked through, they checked again on turn. What do you think the strongest hand they have here is? It's like super thin, right? Like, I think we could even now take an ace out of their range. Now, maybe, again, the better players may still check here with an ace and do the same thing we were talking about doing on turn, where they're just checking with their ace and calling any bet. That could be a possibility. But in a vacuum, I'm going to lean towards this being a very, very weak range. So my value bet here on the river is probably going to be between like third and half pot, because I just want to get called by any jack. I'll obviously get called by an ace if they happen to have an ace. I might even get spike called or hero called by like 9s or 10s or 8s or 7s. Like some middling pocket pair might still find a hero here. It's also interesting to note, like with the ace out there, that like any jack chops, like king jack and jack 10 chop, queen jack, like the kicker doesn't matter, doesn't play because of the ace. So you could see some jack X make a little bit of a looser call here. So maybe that pushes you up to like half or 2/3. But I'm kind of seeing this as like super, super, super capped. Strongest hand, ace jack off, no club. Yeah, like again, going back to what I said on turn, like if you think that this player is like the hyper bluff catching, like egomaniac, just loves to pick people off and just literally like gets his britches in a pissed off if you come after him, like that egomaniac, love the overbet. They didn't mention any history in the hand history. No specific information. So our opponent or our hero does overbet. Wait, yeah, $65 into 51, and our opponent calls with king of clubs, jack of diamonds. So what's interesting to me about this, obviously, like there's a couple things that I see going on here. First, let's go back to his check raise. King of clubs, jack of diamonds, right? Check raising, strong pair, strong kicker, with barrel ability with the king of clubs. Not a terrible check raise. I don't hate it. You know, it is a cutoff open. People love to see bet super wide in the cutoff. Probably cleans up equity and takes down the pot a decent amount of time there. The check on turn is really interesting to me. Because I would think, and maybe this is a mistake, I wouldn't surprise me if this is a mistake. I would think that would be a great barrel card to follow up the check raise with, right? You're drawing to the best flush. That card is a scare card to the over. I wouldn't expect the hero to have a lot of defends that have an ace in them. Like I wouldn't expect us to be like floating with non-club ace and random card. So that feels like a really good barrel card. If we had like queens or kings, maybe we could get off, you know, he could get us off of queens or kings. I don't know. Like obviously could potentially get us off some chops. So I'm a little surprised by the check back on the turn. Once they check river and we overbet, it probably is a theoretical call because like we are blocking the flush draws. The hero checked back on the turn, so it makes it less likely that we have an ace. So I don't hate the call in the river. Probably lucky that they had that exact hand. But yeah, really, really interesting. I would lean towards this being a very thinking player because I don't think population finds that check raise. And I don't think population finds that river call. Worst check with that hand on the turn. I don't know, like double check raise feels a little sus. Like you're taking a hand that has good equity and turning it into a bluff. Because if you double check raise and you get jammed on, you're in like really bad shape. Like you have a hand that has enough equity that we want to see a river card, but not to a check raise 3-bet jam. Like that's just a gross spot to be. Hate to call the river. The ace on the turn is the deciding factor for me. Well, it's one of those things where our check back kind of doesn't make sense. So I could see being in the big blind and going, why would our opponent check back the turn and assume we're really capped? And if you think we're capable of having any overbet shove bluffs, probably not going to find much of a better bluff catcher there. Like we're never going to have ace king with the king of clubs because we would have 3-bet that pre. So I think it comes down to, is anybody ever balanced over betting the pot on the river after checking the turn? Which I think you could make a strong argument that nobody's balanced in that spot. But if your assumption was that players are appropriately balanced there, it's probably the best bluff catcher we can have. But I agree with you. I would never make that call there because I don't give people credit for balancing those types of spots. And I've made a lot of money in cash games and even tournaments against some of my friends looking balanced in those spots and always having it. Because there's just something about that overbet that just makes people go, oh my God, like this has to be a sick bluff and I have to find the way to make the sick call. I think the cutoff won almost the minimum, but should have gone for some more value on turn. Yeah, I lean towards the bet. I definitely in the games I've played in, I would bet turn. But again, 1-2 online. Like maybe this is just a bunch of sickos and you have to kind of play a more balanced and cautious approach and not put yourself in positions where you're just going to get punished on a lot of rivers. All right. We got 2 more hands to go through here. I'm going to bring up this hand from Dan. Let me see if I can shrink this and make it fit. This came in just before we went live. So bear with me here and I'll bring this up. Okay. Dan says, tough spot here. A double up doesn't really help us win that much more often. Still a small favorite to get second. The third highest bounty is still in play at $105. But the other 2 mystery bounties are very low, $10 and $20. Third place pays $105, second place pays $139, and first place $216. So here's our hero, soccer stud, Dan up here. And let's see what we have here. So we get an open shove here from the button. And Dan has a decision to make here with ace 10. What do you guys think? Not going Frank from Always Sunny in the cutoff. Yeah. So here's my thought on this spot. If we had 20 big blinds, 22 big blinds, 25 big blinds, I think in that type of situation, we can start thinking about folding for the sake of ICM. The problem with not taking a spot like this is, one, by the time we get down to where like player 89-17 blinds out, we're going to have 3 bigs. Now, we're hoping and praying and wishing that player 89-17 is going to do the right thing and have a really robust shoving range and not, fold down to like 5 or 6 big blinds. But we can't rely on that. We can't depend on that. We can't hope that that's going to be the case. And I think we run the risk of either A, the third place player taking too long to get all in, and then, yeah, we might ladder up, but now we have no shot at winning the tournament. Or B, the third place player might be aggressive, but we might not see another hand this good for the next 5 minutes, right? Like, we don't know when we're going to get a decent hand again. It's not like we're just going to get ace king and ace queen and aces and king. We have 13 bigs. The blinds are coming through every 3 hands. So I am going with this here. I'm going with this. I expect to be a 60-40 here versus their range. I think we're going to have a lot of just random junk that we're both live, but we have the better card. So we're going to be slightly ahead. And yeah, it sucks to go out, but like, here's the thing. It's a $34 pay jump. And the other aspect of this is the bounty that's in play, right? There's one bounty that's $105. Well, that bounty, to win it, you got to bust the guy that's on your left. And when there's a chip leader and the guy you want to try to bust is on your left, good luck, right? Because what is the situation where you're going to get a chance at their bounty? Like, the chip leader is just going to start shoving a vast majority of hands. So you're basically hoping that, like, you're in the big blind, third place stack shoves, chip leader folds, and then you have a hand that can call. That is a lot of ifs. And then even if you win, there's only a 1 in 3 chance you get the $105 bounty. So I don't see this as an ICM spot at all. I think that this is a very, very, very minimal ICM spot, and I'm going with it probably ace 9 off plus, probably any suited ace, king queen, king jack suited, any pocket pair, queen jack I probably puke fold. Yeah. I don't know, like, I don't know at what point, I don't know at what point I would start making call or start tightening up and folding this. Like, I would definitely need to have like 20 to 25 bigs. Like, if I had 25 bigs here, now we can realistically make a fold. Because now we're in a spot where, if, you know, again, worst case, player 89-17 blinds off, we're still going to have 15 bigs. We can come back and win the tournament. Also, when we have 25 bigs, you know, if the third place player there does shove from the button, now the chip leader's got to shove into our 25 big blind stack, which is a little bit more dicey. So there's a little bit of a better chance that, like, we could get heads up with them. Oh, it's massive. Like, honestly, from an ICM perspective, they can probably shove, I'd say, about 70 to 80% of hands. Like, their shoving range probably looks like a standard big blind defense range. So yeah, this is a fist pump, get it in for me. I shouldn't say fist pump, because I said ace 9 was the bottom of my range. Let's see if we would have, let's be results oriented here. See? See? Now, technically, he would have gotten the pay jump anyway. Because he would have gotten in, he would have had the second biggest stack, still would have finished second, but yeah. All right, one last spot to look at, and then we're going to get out of here for this week. I don't know if any of you saw this hand that poker.org posted on socials. This was the, what was it? It was the $400 no limit 1 day event, 242 people, 18K up to first, 11.8K to second, 7.9K to third. And of course, a ring up top. And yeah, this is the hand. So let me just kind of give you a little high level on what's going on here. I kind of spent some time like zooming in. Ryan Awad here is on the button. Blinds, I believe, are 25 and 50K. He's sitting on what looks like about 3.4, 3.5 million. So we'll call it like 60 to 70 bigs. The gentleman here in the small blinds is Sean Roberts. Looks like they're sitting on like 1.4 mil. So maybe like 27, 28 bigs. And then the big blind here is sitting on like 1.2 mil. So like 24 bigs. And the action goes, Ryan raises to 2 big blinds. Sean 3 bets to 5 big blinds. Short stack here basically goes all in, doesn't go all in, goes all in for like 2/3 of their stack, raising to 15 big blinds. And then the chip leader comes over the top and shoves. And the small blind here has pocket queens. And so the question is, 3-handed, ring up top, $18,000 up top. You're looking at a $4,000 pay jump. Big blind is pretty much committed. We don't expect the big blind to fold. What are you doing here with queens? SI Bovine said he's seen this hand a lot. It's been around. By the way, Juka Man, thank you so much for the 23 months. Chad says he's folding. Joey, I think, did Joey say he was folding? No, that was Chad. So here's the funny thing. And I haven't looked at the comments, so I don't know. Doesn't look like there is any comments yet. I expected like a treasure trove of comments. I'm not 100% sure this is a fold for ICM. So let's just think about ranges here for a second. Chip leader. What's chip leader's opening range? Chip leader's opening range is really wide here, right? Like really wide. Like they're supposed to be opening 50-ish% of hands normally, but because of the chip lead and the ICM pressure, they can open again 70, 75, 80% of hands. Super, super, super wide. Now, what does, yeah, right, pretty much any 2 cards. You're right, Jess. Now, what does the 3-bet range look like from the small blind? This should be decently strong, right? What's interesting about this 3-bet size is only going to 5 bigs, which this is something I definitely do in tournaments because people do not adjust to it. Like this small sizing allows him to do a couple things. One, if he needs to fold, he's probably still going to have more chips in 3rd place, which matters. 2, he keeps the pot at a size where, you know, he can c-bet and not commit himself to the pot. He may even be able to go potentially 2 streets and not commit himself to the pot. So he's got options. And he's got a chip leader who's playing damn near 80 to 90% of hands, who's incentivized to call. And when you have queens and you need to double up and the chip leader has 65 plus bigs, the temptation is like, oh, get it in here. But this is the sick way to kind of really build a pot and maybe get the chip leader to, you know, flop top pair with a jack or a 10 and, you know, give us a nice double up. So this is, I actually really, really like this sizing. Now, the big blind says, no, I'm going to come over the top here and basically commit my stack. Now, what do we think the big blind's range looks like here? Small blind 3-bet is going to be the tightest range. I think that really depends on what you think the big blind interprets the small blind's 3-bet range as. Because if the big blind thinks that this 3-bet is just complete bullshit, then you're probably right. But if the big blind looks at this 3-bet and goes, this is pretty strong, then the big blind's 4-bet range is just like juggernaut strong. I mean, it's definitely not super weak. Now, what's really interesting to me is I kind of wonder, like with the 750K, if if Ryan shoves and the small blind calls, I bet the big blind was going to fold. Which makes me kind of wonder why the big blind didn't go a little smaller, like 600 or 650K. Because the big blind definitely doesn't need to go 3x here to apply pressure or look incredibly strong. I mean, basically, like 600K puts the big blind's entire stack, over more than half the big blind stack in the middle. So basically, they're going to look pot committed no matter how many they put in. So the 750K is a little kind of a weird sizing for me. But this is wild because, like, I think the chip leader's range here is wider than people think. Like, I'm not surprised to see the chip leader turn over ace queen here at all. It doesn't surprise me because the chip leader is basically incentivized to like push the small blind out of the pot. If they can get the small blind to fold, now you're playing heads up for a 2.9 million chip pot that you only had to put like 1.2 into. And so even if he's behind, like his odds, like his pot odds there aren't horrific. And versus that player's range, like if he's flipping a decent percentage of the time, if he's in like 29 to 31% equity spots where like, it's like ace queen versus kings or something, like he's not losing that much if he can push the small blind out of the pot. So I actually think the chip leader's range is decently wide here. It all comes down to what we think this big blind's range is. Oh, it was pepperoni and jalapeno from Domino's this week. Forward range should be aces, kings, ace, king off, and suited, and ace, queen suited. Do we think the big blind ever does this with jacks? Do we think the big blind ever does this with tens? Yeah, you got halfway there. Like, I think if we can put jacks and tens in the big blind's range, I actually think this is a call for the small blind. I think if you take jacks and tens out of the big blind's range, then it's a fold. I really think it's that close. Because there is a decent percentage of the time where they're going to be sharing outs. I do think the big blind here could be as wide, or sorry, the chip leader, the button could be as wide as like ace jack suited, ace 10 suited. I mean, if he's playing ace queen off, you should be doing ace jack suited and ace 10 suited the same way, because the kicker doesn't matter. Like, he's never running into ace 10 here, right? So it's not like, or even ace jack, like the big blind never has ace jack. So the difference between ace queen and ace 10 suited is that ace queen blocks queens, but ace 10 suited gives you a little bit more equity. So those hands are basically the same. So the only range we're really worried about is the big blind. And if we can find two pocket pairs in his 4-bet range, then this is go for it time. Now, what's interesting, you guys, it's going to be hard to see on here, but I'll show you how this plays out if you didn't see this. So chip leader had ace king with the ace of clubs. The 4-better had ace queen. Okay, which is interesting, right? So if the 4-better has ace queen, the 4-better probably has jacks. I think we can feel pretty confident about that. But the board comes 10 of clubs, queen of clubs, 3 of clubs. And the turn is the 6 of clubs. So queens would have flopped a set and lost to a flush on the turn. So the ace queen hand does brick out and gets eliminated. And then Chip Leader goes on to get pocket aces in against pocket threes and ends up winning the tournament. So the queen's fold did net him an extra $4,000. And the one main thing, like I can't stress this enough about these spots, because the first thing people do when they see this spot is they run to the ICM calculator and they throw a bunch of numbers in and they go, oh, look, this is an ICM call, or oh, look, this is an ICM fold. And that's all great and fine and dandy, but this is real life, okay? ICM calculators don't know how much your rent is, don't know what your income is, doesn't know what the size of your bankroll is, doesn't know how long it's been since you've won a tournament. It doesn't know how much you value a ring or don't value a ring. It doesn't know how much of a downswing or upswing you're on, right? And those are all variables that, if we're going to be human about it, if we're going to be honest about it, be human about it, matter, right? If an extra $4,000 quadruples your bankroll, that has to weigh in a little bit. If you've never had a 5-figure score and that's been your dream for 10 years, that has to weigh in a little bit. And people will push back and say, no, you want to do the thing that makes the most money. Well, money isn't always the deciding factor for everybody, right? Like, this could be an ICM fold, but the person with queens could go, you know what? I really want to win a ring. I don't care about the money. This is my spot. I'm going to go for it. Okay. I'm behind it, right? Like, it makes sense. So I always want to encourage people, because here's what I don't want any of you to do. I don't want you to be in a spot where you have life-changing money and you have something you really want to do. You're the one that bought into the tournament. You're the one playing the tournament. You're the one responsible for the decisions. And you sit there and you go, man, I really want to fold here, but everybody will yell at me if I fold. Don't give a shit what anybody else would think, okay? Play your hand, play your tournament, do what you think is best, and let the rest of it just kind of fall into place. Good stuff. All right, well, I need to drop my shameless plug that I do tonight, 7:30 Eastern. Watch ChaseTheDream.com, or you can head to YouTube.com/ChaseTheDreamPoker. We're going to have our live podcast that we do every Wednesday night, me and 6 of my friends. We essentially talk about chasing the poker dream, the highs, the lows, the ups, the downs, the successes, the failures. It's a really good time. We have a lot of fun, and you get to hear from some everyday people, people that have full-time jobs, people who are retired, who are chasing their poker dreams and dealing with everything that comes with that. So you can get a lot of inspiration from it. You can learn from all of their mistakes, all of my mistakes. It's a good time. So hopefully you guys will tune in for that. And again, huge shout out to Rec Poker for being a part of this. And make sure you please go check them out over at joinrec.poker. Join the Discord. It's absolutely free to join the Discord. You can drop questions in that Discord. There's a channel just for this stream, and we go on and we answer the questions that come in there every single week. But I appreciate you all being here and hanging out. That's going to be it for me. We'll be back next week for episode 3, right before I head out to running aces for the annual Rec Poker event. We'll see you guys. Thank you for tuning in.